The moment that we have all been waiting for. We have a chance to now sit down and all of you will have a chance to engage with one of our greatest leaders of our current time, a man who has led tremendous growth in this country and is an advocate for gender equality, environmental conservation, innovation and prosperity on this continent. His Excellency, Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda. Please join me on stage. President Kagame, thank you so much for making the time to have this conversation with us today. I know all the young people in the audience and our viewers on YouTube and members of the room who are joining us from around the world. Some people are in the US at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. and very excited to be in this conversation with you. When I asked you to have this conversation, you graciously agreed, but on one condition. You said that you wanted me to come to Rwanda and to have this conversation with a group of young people. And throughout the years that I've known you, President Kagame, I've always seen how much you believe in young people. You know, whether it's investing in education or many of your own ministers in the cabinet, I've always been surprised at how young they are. The people who work in your personal office, very young people who are guiding you and working with you on a day-to-day basis, yourself personally as a leader. And even, investing in things like the Kigali sports arena to ensure that young people have access to sports. I remember attending a concert there once. I can't remember if it was Neo or Pato Ranking from Nigeria, and there was a big, thousands of young people who had gathered. But at some point, I couldn't tell who the star was because you came into the room and you went down to the floor, and everyone started, cheering. But it's very clear as well that young people really also enjoy the interactions with you. So I just really wanted to start with understanding why young people matter so much to you. Why do the young people of Rwanda especially matter so much to you? And then also, when you think about the African continent more broadly, what do you see as the potential of young people and also the challenges of young people in Africa?
Good. Thank you, Fred. At that time we met, not only was I enjoying the company of the young people, but also enjoying the music and the dancing. So, to your question, we all, when we are lucky and happy to be living, and we many times live in the moment, we make sense of that moment. But at the same time, there is more sense to be made based on that moment for the future. It's the moment, it's more so the future. And when you're talking about the future, you're talking about those who are going to be in that future or to actually build the future or live those moments of the future. And you are necessarily talking about the young people of now. And that also means the life of a country. The country in the future is to be shaped by the very young people of today. So if the thinking goes like that, then that is the sense it makes to be thinking about the young people today, but more so thinking of them for the sake of the future. So that's my thinking. I guess it's the thinking of many people who see the value of the young people and the need to invest in them, and they know they're investing in the future when they're investing in the young people.
And just a follow-on question to that, Mr. President, why do you think that, when you go beyond Rwanda and you look at the whole continent, the average age of an African, as I mentioned, is 19. And do you believe that your fellow leaders on the continent and the whether it's leaders in business and leaders in government, what more should we be doing to really open up opportunities for the young people of Africa?
Well, every leader, I guess, they do things differently, but for every leader or leaders of a country, there are many different levels. There are things you want to build that form a foundation on which generations will take turns building different things for themselves, for the country, for the population. So in Rwanda, that's where I'm used to things we do here. I'm a participant. We try to concentrate on investing in our young people, in technology on which they can build, or help them move forward, the infrastructure, the institutions that hold the population together. And so this, if you take just that as an example, I imagine that's what different societies, different countries try to do as well. And maybe sometimes we do things differently. People succeed and others not as well as the others have succeeded. And that is due to many reasons, so depending on the conditions in which different people operate. But I always hope that, again, as we started earlier, people's responsibilities don't get lost just in the moment, and they concentrate on that and stop thinking about the future. So leaders, therefore, what I know we are all supposed to be thinking about is about what we have, what we see, what we hear in the moment, but take it and project it so many years ahead. And you really can't do that without investing, as we have repeatedly said, in the young people and providing these opportunities we understand that shape them, and therefore they also help shape the future.
So for you, it's really about that long-term view, recognizing that young people are the future, and if you want to build a society that is stable and prosperous and that actually thrives in the long term, then you have to invest in young people.
There's no doubt about that.
Okay. Now, Your Excellency, here in the room, we talk a lot about doing hard things, and we challenge the members of the room who are very influential, very successful, to use their privilege to do hard things, because we believe that the only way they can justify their privilege is by not solving small problems and easy things, but by doing hard things to really change society and to create opportunities for others, like the young people that are in the room today. Now, you've done some incredibly hard things. You've transformed Rwanda into a fast-growing economy after a devastating genocide. Today, you've also led the reform of one of the most difficult institutions to reform, which is the African Union. Rwanda is now one of the first countries on this continent that is going to be manufacturing its own vaccines. In fact, last week, Tuesday, I interviewed on this very show Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala from the World Trade Organization, and she was, very passionate and complimentary about the work that you were doing to manufacture vaccines in Rwanda. So these are some of the most difficult things that one could choose to do. And yet you continue to choose to do hard things. Why do you do this time and time again? Do you choose to do some of these very difficult things?
Well, to begin with, those hard things must be done, first of all. Somebody has got to do the hard things. Why I would look at myself as one not to be among those doing the hard things, I wouldn't have a good reason, so I do that. But I also want to say, it's not just doing hard things. In fact, it starts with doing even simple things. Sometimes people take things to be so simple that they don't pay attention to them, yet cumulatively, they really add up to situations that will require you to do the hard things. So you can make the work of doing hard things much easier by paying attention to the simple, smaller things in time. So that the whole movement, I liked the way you called things here, the pathway. The pathway can be very difficult or can be simple, depending on how you paid attention to the simple, the easy, but also the hard things. So it's not just going for the hard things necessarily, but the hard things also have their time, especially like the example you just given. We reach there, and when we look back, at the moment of doing the hard things, you look back and say, well, we've lost time. If we had done a few things properly, the right way, 10 years ago, maybe these hard things would not be there today for us to, immerse ourselves and start doing them. They would be simpler because we would have laid the foundation, we would have put the infrastructure in place to deliver on them. Sometimes they become hard things just because they were not paid attention to in good time.
So what you're saying is that on the journey to doing hard things, the destination might be a very difficult thing to imagine, getting to that top of that mountain. But sometimes doing hard things requires doing simple things in the beginning, and it's accumulation of all those simple things. Like the Chinese say, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Absolutely. Taking those small steps. Can you give us an example of a simple thing that others may have taken for granted, but that you thought was important and that you saw as a key ingredient or as a step towards achieving a much, much more difficult thing?
Well, let me give you an example of city of Kigal. Where it was 20 years ago and where it is now, completely different worlds. So when you look at the city now, the infrastructure, the cleanliness, the traffic lights, everything almost in place. You would say doing this thing was very hard, right? But the journey started 20 years ago. And starting with what you can do, just do it right. I remember having a discussion with fellow cabinet members when this whole thing about keeping our environment clean and sustainable. And the beginning of the conversation was, do we need donors to give us money to keep our homesteads clean, to even ourselves as tidy and safe and healthy as we can? There are things we can do. We don't have to wait for somebody to come and hand to us the means to do that, because we have the means within ourselves. So I said, why don't we do what we can at this moment? Why don't we just, pick the litter and put that in the right place where they belong in. And then with the time, as the economy grows and does fine, as the revenues grow and so on, and of course as donors, donate to us what they can and usually do, then we shall, from these means acquired, start investing in the things we weren't able to do because we had no means for that. So the simple things, therefore, that looks simple. For a light moment, I would say, sometimes when that exercise started, I would be driving in the city. When I saw the litter around, plastic bags, paper thrown all over, I would literally, stop my car, convoy, and that tended to also stop the traffic. But the purpose would be I would get out with my escort guards who are paid to do different things and say, let's we would pick that litter. We would say, why would I pass and leave the litter?
A whole president of a country picking up litter.
Exactly. So, but that has an effect. One, even starting with my entourage, they started thinking, we shouldn't leave this whole thing here. First of all, why do people go throwing litter around? And same time, the traffic that has come to a halt, because I think they would even start saying, what is this man up to? What's wrong with him? When they see me do that, they start thinking about it. They say, why would, as you said, why would the president stop and do this? And then next you say, maybe I should also not just pass by this and do that. So these are simple things. You don't need to pay a lot of money. You don't need to be paid a lot of money to do that, to just... this is a simple thing. But that in combination now with the investments that are to be made ahead now for the hard things to happen, you see, one thing leads to another, but they also are complementary. If you waited to go for the big thing and the hard thing, and then you leave these small things here and there without paying attention to them, then you probably miss the point, and in the end, you don't arrive at the good results you want.
So you've touched on a few things. You're talking about the importance of leading by example, you getting out of the car yourself and picking up the litter. You're talking about self-reliance as well, not waiting for donors to give you the funding so you can clean up the streets. Get going. And then that, also, you talked about, you also touched on what that does to the psyche, and then also in terms of the work ethic that it creates and the standards that you set to say that it's important enough to keep our streets clean. And therefore, this sets a high aspiration for the country, and then people then want to do more.
And it is important enough for the president to get out of the car and pick.
So if he can do it, you have no excuse to not do it yourself. Excellent. Now, Mr. President, you make a lot of unconventional decisions. For example, Rwanda was the first country, I think, in the world to allow blood delivery by drone with zipline. In the early stages, when you went after the genocide, when you were thinking about rebuilding the economy, you prioritized sectors that others would have thought, this is not the most important. You decide to invest in the environment, and you prioritize, conservation, tourism around the gorillas as one of the first things to do to really rebuild the economy. You built a national airline and created this world-class convention center at a time when most people couldn't imagine Rwanda as where they would go for their conferences. And finally, today, Rwanda is the first African country to brand 2 football teams, Arsenal and Paris Saint-Germain. Again, people wouldn't think, why is an African country investing in branding European football teams? So when you make these decisions, I can imagine that they might not be popular, either in Rwanda and even around the world. What gives you the courage to make these decisions when others don't believe in what you're proposing? And how do you bring people along to achieve these great things?
Well, that is the most difficult question, perhaps, but also experience. And in most cases, there are things that have been talked about. You give, let's say, to young people, you give them an education, you give them advice, you do all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, there are things only these people, these young people, can give to themselves. You may give them everything you can give them. But there's that thinking in them. They have to undertake to say, what sense do I make with all this that I have acquired? I have acquired education, I'm healthy, I've been advised, to be a leader. You don't become a leader or you don't develop a vision by just going to school. No. Somehow you build on what you have acquired, and then there's something that only you can give to yourself. And that is, what do you do with what you have? So let me go to the bigger question you raised. For example, when we arrived here, 94, the population, half of the population, a big part of it dead, a bigger part of it displaced, others in the old problems they had anyway, because this has been a poor country and feeding on what is given to us and so on and so forth. That is the story. So when we took over in 94, with all this devastation, you are challenged to say, where do I start from? What do I do? You have no means, you have no people. Even the people you have, everyone is just grieving and doesn't know where to start from. And everyone is, in the end, that's how actually people start blaming each other for their misery. It's like you think when you're having a problem, it's somebody else who caused it. And everybody thinks like that, and it goes around to the point that, but in a situation like that, you have to do some hard thinking. You talked about doing hard things. The hard thinking is, what do I do? How do I move on? Where do I start from? So you are challenged to think beyond what we are used to, because you might have, a textbook that tells you, to build an economy, to do this, you follow this path, you do this, you do that. It doesn't work in that time.
It's not in the textbook?
It just doesn't. Textbook is probably 10%. The rest is that hard thinking. And thinking out of the box. You no longer have to say, to achieve this. For example, we also had another big problem. We had cases in the hundreds of thousands of people who have killed their fellow Rwandans. Forget about whether anybody had justification or that. No, let's put even that aside. You already have people. And in that situation, you're going to necessarily have those who have lost and are aggrieved, the perpetrators, and then there is trying to settle it the way they can. If somebody lost a family and is thinking the other one is the one responsible, they will not wait for the textbook justice. They want to go for that one and actually sort it out for themselves and say, you killed my brother, I'll kill yours, or you killed my father, I'll kill yours, and so on and so forth. And on that scale, the things were here. There was no rational thinking to an extent. Everyone was just affected by what they have seen, what they have experienced, what has happened to them, and so on and so forth. To the extent you look around for the textbook that can give you a pathway from that point to move on, you won't find it. Therefore, it is that I was talking about. It is that is in everyone that they can look up to and say, what do I do in this moment? My personal experience. People made contributions with the different experiences, and it all came together to give us what we were later to achieve. But mine was, first, for example, I was leading an army that fought and secured the country in the end. But those fighters I was with, many of them had lost their parents, their relatives, they were left alone. And you imagine this person who has been fighting for something to liberate their country and finds nothing about their family, stopping that person to take it upon themselves to deal with the matter the way they understand it is difficult. It has to be outside of the textbook or the conventional thinking. But we had to do that. We had to say, look, what we have done is much bigger than ourselves. We have secured our country. It's true and it makes sense, the way you are aggrieved, it's justified, and even what actions you can carry out may be actually justified in that sense. But if we allowed ourselves to be carried away and do that, which we think and which might be justified, what is going to be the end? It's just going to create a cycle of violence that will actually even consume the lives of those who are still living, all of us. So we've got to create a starting point, and the starting point is, let's try and live with our pain and manage it, and then create space for a movement forward, create stability, create a sense of security, and start building what we can build in terms of institutions, and then we can look back and start delivering what we were not able to deliver at the beginning. You know what developed, like in terms of justice, Gacaca and so on. Gacaca, it was just soul-searching. Because you knew if you had to take hundreds of thousands of cases to court. Which courts? First of all, the courts weren't there. Even if they were there, anywhere, wherever they have working courts and a lot of capacity, even if you said, please come and help me try these cases, they would not manage. It would take hundreds of years to do that. But we can't wait for hundreds of years to live our lives of the moment. So we had to keep finding ways out of the conventional methods that we know, so that's really how we were more or less, other than even the fact that originally we set out to liberate our country. Therefore, we had a mission we understood very well, and we knew it had a lot of problems, but not as difficult or as many problems as we later on came to meet. So using that background and at the same time challenging ourselves to how we can deal with new situations that we cannot find examples of anywhere to address, and that we ourselves were the ones to deal with that. So that challenge that was, we were really pressure cooked. It's like we had to find a way of surviving that, and that delivered in many ways for us. It had to take some rational thinking to get out of that and apply different means that people may not be used to, whether ourselves or others who saw it from outside, but managed to come out like that. So I cannot say there is any magic that was here applied. It's what is possible with the people. We did what is possible. If, as human beings, our story tells two parts here. One part about human beings is how destructive, even self-destructive we can be. But on the other side, part of our story, which is one we are living today and interesting, is also how human beings can reach within themselves to do the very things that in the end may look like a miracle. So it's all human beings. It's all within us, and it depends on, this is why I'm saying You probably don't go to school anywhere for it, but we have it within us. And where we go to school and the education we get, of course, can be helpful. It informs you more, better, but there is that part that only we and others can do for themselves.
So you again, coming back to that point about self-reliance, and there's certain things that you really can't be taught how to do. So you touched on two things that I thought important. One is the importance of really learning by doing, right? Because one of the things that we share with our young leaders at African Leadership Academy and African Leadership University, that to effectively develop yourself as a leader, only 10% of the skills can be learned in the classroom. 20% comes from developmental relationships with your mentors and peers and coaches, and 70% comes from experience. You learn by doing. You have to try things and fail and keep going. So as much as important as it is to get education, you're not going to be able to solve. Perhaps more important is to learn how to become a problem solver. And then with those problem-solving skills, when you meet new problems that you haven't identified before in the textbook, you can then solve them. And that's one of the things we really try and embed in our students, is to enable them to become problem solvers, not simply people who have memorized facts and figures. The other thing that you talked about was something that I always personally believe in, is about how constraints drives innovation. And you were faced with a lot of constraints. As you mentioned, it would have taken a century to take people through the normal court system after the genocide. So you had to think about a different way. You didn't have many resources to develop the country, so you had to think a different way. And so, in theory, Africa, therefore, should be the most innovative continent in the world, because we have a lot of constraints, and it forces you to reimagine and to rethink. You can't do things a conventional way when you have all these constraints. You have to reimagine and reinvent.
Absolutely.
And that's what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my last question before we take a break.
So in other words, just a small thing before we leave that, to add what you said. The young people here, one thing you can learn, as a person, first, before you go to another for help, make sure you have challenged yourself enough as to how much you can do
for yourself.
Then, after that, you can reach out to a friend and say, but if you do it the other way around, it doesn't work well. If every time it's a problem, Fred, help me, that's a big problem. But I will definitely come. But I will definitely come to Fred when I have really tried and convinced myself that probably I need help. Then it's right. It's okay to go for help.
Mm-hmm. Yes. People help those who help themselves.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So get started. I hope you're listening, young people in the room. So my last question before we go for a break. Here in the room, we're an African organization, but we have global plans. And the reason we're building a global network is because we believe that it's important for these African talent that we're developing to be able to access global capital when they start their businesses, and to be able to access global markets, if they're trying to export and so forth. And also one thing that COVID has made possible is that now it's possible to work globally without the brain drain. You can be sitting in Rwanda as a software engineer working for Siemens in Germany. You can be a designer in Nigeria working for Zara in Spain. And today, COVID has actually made companies a lot more open to hiring talent around the world. So we thought that we need to build a global platform and let the world know that we have top talent in that platform. And that allows us to export African talent, but without the brain drain, and to really create opportunities for young people on a global scale. Now, I've seen you engage a lot on the global stage as well. I remember in 2019, when we still used to travel, I went to San Francisco, and I went to the headquarters of Facebook. And they said, oh, President Kagame was here last week. And then I flew to New York, and I met up with a friend and an investor, Matt Harris. I think you know him. And he said, oh, I just hosted President Kagame for a dinner. And we've met several times at the Milken Summit in Los Angeles and so forth. So you clearly engage globally, but yet you're proudly African. So why is it so important for you to engage on the global stage, and how have you leveraged those global relationships to drive Rwanda's progress and development?
By the way, I should have done that earlier. I have done it before anyway. Let me thank you for, Fred, thank you for being the idea behind this African Leadership University. It's really Pan-African. And it also gives us pride to be one of the hosts of the
and thank you for
African
your support.
Leadership University. So, you see, there is a lot of work to do here in Africa. But it's always going to serve us well if we move not only in the right direction, but move properly, in the right manner. The right manner, is there are things we need to address here in Africa ourselves. We have the talent, the young people, the numbers speak for themselves. In comparison, you said Italia with the rest of the world. So we have to be organized. We need to get organized. How do we, therefore, if we have the talent, if we have the young people, such a huge population, how do we get them organized in order for them gain from the opportunities available and develop, but also maximize on that talent pool and how we can tap into it ourselves for the African benefit. But then from there, now, it's not just start with Africa and end with Africa. Africa is part of the world. There are things other parts of the world have that we need, either because we don't have them, and not even, or because we need them to develop ourselves to the levels where others are. So, therefore, how we get linked to the rest of the world is important. And that's how what you referred to has been happening. Not only am I trying to contribute to having the Rwandan talent pool, the African talent pool, develop with what we have, what we can put in place at that moment, or what is available to us. But immediately I have to think about how do we connect this to the outside world, because we need the outside world for different things that are very vital to our own progress. And that's how exactly what you said has been happening. It's talent, other talents that exist that you connect with. It's capital that we need, that we have to link up with. It's technology that we need. And So that there is that link between Africa, Rwanda, and the rest of the world, and then that will speed up our own progress. That's really what I have in mind.
So Africa is part of the world, and we cannot develop without engagement. We need access to capital, access to technology, access to talent, and access to relationships that can really allow this part of the world to benefit. And it's not only for Africans benefit, but for the rest of the world, they also benefit because they also then get access to, to talent and to markets and things like that. So it's a win-win.
Welcome back, Your Excellency and Dr. Swaniker. We will now proceed to the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Alice, and I hope you were able to get some refreshments and get some good bathroom breaks. And for those of you online, I hope you're still with us, and we're now going to go to an interactive session with His Excellency the President. And we're going to start first with a couple of questions from our live audience who are joining us from different parts of Africa. The first person who's going to ask us a question is joining us from Ghana. Her name is Mrs. Margaret Nkrumah, and she's the former CEO of SOS International organization, and she also started SOS International School. I think I have a problem with my mic. Can we have the question, please?
Naturally, you have a great deal of negative press from certain Western countries, despite visible and tangible evidence of your achievements. How do you deal with these accusations and vilifications, both publicly and internally? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's a very, really good question. There is only so much that one can do. And you, at least from my perspective, you always try to do what you can do and do the right thing and do it the right way. So the negative press from especially the Western world, it's not new. It has been there for the last 27 years, really, since 94, I remember. So there is not much I can do about it, or any of us can do about it here in Rwanda, because yes, it is from the other end. That's how they see things. Whether correctly or not, that's how they, or maybe that's how they want to see things. There's how you see things, but there's also how you want to see things. I think in this case, maybe it is both. But so from the other side, ourselves, there is no way I can change easily how someone wants to see me or sees me from their own perspective. Sometimes they must be looking at us through the lenses of their own, where they come from, where things really might be different from our own. So there are ways maybe one can. The first thing that comes to my mind, what needs, what we can do in Rwanda, is take stock of what the press is saying. And try to analyze it and say, well, is this thing right about us? Or maybe it's wrong. Or does it have a basis? Or maybe you may learn something and it may help you to correct something you can correct. If you really discover maybe they make sense. So that's where we concentrate. First, what we do in Rwanda and what we've tried to do for so many years now is really our business. We think what we do is our business before it becomes somebody else's business. And we do it for ourselves, and we try to do it the best way we can because we are the ones who benefit from it or lose from that if we do wrong things. So that interaction between what perception is about you from outside and what you think is right for you to do for yourselves, really, I think, may help lead even to getting things better. But the concentration should be more on doing what you think is the right thing for you. So that's why we concentrate. We concentrate on saying whatever angle they attack from, criticize and insult and do things and misrepresent us, and we still want to look at, could there be something maybe we need to pay attention to and bring it back to what we all along have been trying to do for ourselves, and then see if it can improve us on many things or one thing or another, and then we move along. That's the only option we have really to deal with that. Otherwise, it will take a very long time for me to go into details of what I think about that. So I just maybe confine myself to these few important remarks I've made. But we also know we have to deal with the world that, and here this is Africa, this is Rwanda, there is, from the outside, the Western media and others, well, even sometimes the politicians from there, they really think they are entitled to present us as they want us to be, not as we want ourselves to be. So they always make that judgment of saying, what is he doing? But what is he doing? What is he doing about this, about that, is from how they would do them in their own place. Or sometimes, in fact, not consistent. Sometimes they may criticize you for doing what they do just because they think you are actually not entitled to doing that. You can't do that. That's not for you. It's for us. So there is this back and forth that goes on forever. So in order not to be distracted and keep answering yourself on everything or being dragged to think like other people think and not think for yourselves about what we should be thinking and doing, you just concentrate on understanding what your problem is and trying to do the best you can to address it, whether they are small things or the hard things, holistically. But keep hearing, listening, and and learning. And learning may be one thing or two, and it doesn't matter it doesn't matter to want to do any harm for people to listen and say, oh, does this really merit criticism? Does it? Maybe it does. And if you find it does, then you address it, but always keeping in focus what is for you. Because we are not supposed to be people just answering to others all the time, or framing our lives and our thinking just along the lines set by others. No, that's not for me. That's not for Rwandans. I think that's.
So you're saying you don't ignore the criticism. You listen to it. You see what's what is valid, and what you might learn from it, and how you might improve some things. But then you're also very capable of, separating that from criticism that maybe you don't feel is unjustified, and you also have your own standards and your own, and one of the things that I love as well is very often the spirit of Agaciro that you talk about here in Rwanda, believing in ourselves and self-sustenance, and I think that's a wonderful spirit that others in Africa can also borrow. Okay, our next question comes from another member of the room, and his name is Ken Njoroge. He's joining us from Nairobi, Kenya.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Ken Njoroge. I'm an entrepreneur based in Nairobi, Kenya. Over the last 18 years, I co-founded and built a fintech company that expanded across Africa. We have 18 offices across Africa, serving 35 countries. We employ about 450 people. About 90% of them are young people between 25 and 30. We've been a proud member of the room and a good partner to the AL group. We sponsored 6 students throughout the university program. Recently, we took another 6 in a graduate management program. The plan is to hire about 6 to 10 ALU students from the different campuses, Mauritius and the campus in Kigali. I have been a fan and a big follower of your leadership journey over the last 3 decades, from the early days of the liberation struggle to the current social and economic transformation of Rwanda. When I look at that journey, I see hope for the continent. And my question to you, Your Excellency, is what will Africa and Africans need to do over the next 2, 3, or 4 decades to be able to mirror the kind of growth and transformation that Rwanda has, and for Africa to earn its place in the global stage? Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you for your remarks. And first, the conversation that we have had here was about different growth paths we see in Africa or can take in different parts of our continent. And so I guess the problems of Africa, Rwanda's, and where we have come from, we need, one, to understand that business should not be as usual. And we must, because there are comparisons to make. You look back in history, and then where we were 40 years ago, now we are talking about 40 years ahead, and see where others were at that time that were maybe equivalent in terms of the standing in socio-economic development. The last 40 years, we found those who were like different parts of our continent have moved ahead so many times and left our continent, our countries, or the continent behind. Or even where we were at that time, we have declined instead of. At the same time, like in Njoroge again, like he has just explained what he's doing, what he's able to do, and that means we actually can do certain things. We are able to do a number of things that contribute to raising our economies to the social economic development to a much higher level than where we are now. So maybe we need to be a little bit better organized on our continent and be deliberate and treat what we are doing with a sense of urgency, that there is a serious problem we have to address, not just for individuals. Individuals on our continent, many of them solve their problems. They are well-to-do, they've been educated, they do business, they're entrepreneurs, they're innovators. So at individual levels, we are doing fine. No, but here we are talking about now, well, but that's also a small number. It shouldn't be exaggerated compared to the rest. If you are looking at the whole population of our continent, which is now getting over 1.2 billion people. So now the others, let's say the 80% of that population, and then the countries of our continent that should serve our own people. There has been, of course, in the past, this migration from rural to urban areas, which has both sides. It's a very good side of it. There is also the downside to it in the sense that these migrations, really deliberate or happening on the basis of the movement of talent and skills and so on and so forth. No. Or how about those who stay there? At what level do they stay of this socio-economic standing? So you find there is huge disparity. So I think the next 4 years we should be addressing this problem where Africa really, then we see the examples. We need to develop. And different levels of our society need to be part of it and benefit as well, so that the development you see in my country is not just the 10% are doing fine, and then the 90%, and then we count the wealth of the 10% and say, oh, Rwanda is doing very well. No, Rwanda is not doing very well when you have 90 or 80%, left with nothing. So this is the problem we have to address, building on, for example, the contributions that can be made by such companies as Njoroge's, fintechs in the financial sector, financial services, and then you can move to any other sector and look at what is there, what I need to do to fill these gaps that remain, that are huge, between these different levels of our society as far as the socio-economic indicators are concerned, where Africa really is way behind the rest of the world. So for Rwanda, therefore, and as part of Africa, and Africa generally, we have some similarities in terms of opportunities as well as the problems we have before us that we have to manage. So it's organization. I'm hesitating to say it's also largely political. The politics, the political economy of our countries need to be sorted out or looked at differently so that it's about uplifting everybody. It's about actually properly utilizing the resources we have, the immense resources we have. You know, the analogy that has gone around several times where it's like you have everything in your backyard and then you leave it there, you go begging. or something else. Sometimes you have everything around in your backyard. Somebody comes and helps themselves with it, and then you run after them to say, "Give me something."
Can I have some of it back?
Yeah. So this is something that Africa needs to change, and we are capable of doing it. The person who asked the question, Njoroge, is one of those who, and so many of them like him, are capable if the politics, our politics allowed us to scale that up and spread it, and everybody, these young people who get educated and come up, have that thinking of saying, no, but it's not just for me. It's for my family, it's for my country, it's for my continent. We can work together. So all these things like the African Continental Free Trade Area that has been put in place, the story about it. First of all, we thought about it too late already. It should have come
20 years ago.
20, 30 years ago. Same time, what does that mean? It means our own countries are not trading with one another like other countries in other continents do. So it's like we are just small silos on our continent. And so we need to break these barriers deliberately and also really treat what we are doing not as business as usual.
So it's about, so if I can synthesize what I heard you say, you said to really move Africa forward in line with Njoroge's question, it's about not doing business as usual. So going back to the conversation earlier about thinking unconventionally, about recognizing what you have in your own backyard and not just waiting for someone to come and find value in your own, richness that you have. It's also about Pan-African collaboration and breaking down barriers like what the African Continental Free Trade Area is trying to do, and also about leadership and political leadership that ultimately prizes creating opportunity for the vast majority that do not have, and not simply enriching the few that already do. So that's the blueprint for Africa, people. Okay, so we're now going to take some questions from the audience in the room, and I'm going to invite Alice to take us through this part.
Thank you. So we will now take a few questions from the room. Please remember to introduce yourself, your school, and followed by a question. Please raise your hand high so I can see you. Be clear and concise when you're asking your questions. So we're going to take the first question from this side. Please, go on.
Good afternoon again, Your Excellency. My name is Joel Twagireyezu, and I'm from the African Leadership University. pursuing international business and trade in my third year. My question goes, after the Liberation War in 1994, you had a mindset of saying, let's work together, let's put aside vengeance, and you had to also work with people who were in the government of the overseer of the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994. So I wanted to know, what was the mindset as one of the person who were affected directly or indirectly by the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994?
Yeah, well, in that case, we had to sort of put aside a little bit our personal grievances that actually rose to the national level because there were so many involved. But for a reason of reality, that there is nothing you could do at that moment or even any other moment to reverse what happened. You could only manage it and try to come out fine in the circumstances, but you couldn't, as a country, we are not going to be able to recover what we lost. We lost people and there was no way of returning them. So, one, you have to think about how to manage that. The second, you also have to find a way of managing the future. And more importantly, the future. Those who are still alive and those who will be there tomorrow and the country and so on and so forth. So where we had to start from was to try and hold the country together. In fact, at one time we had a mixture, even in the government, as you mentioned, where even in the government, there were people who also sympathized with even the perpetrators of that genocide, or even who were being accused, actually, but we were looking for evidence. Some people were being accused of actually having participated, but they were sitting in a cabinet. So you see here, you try to transcend almost this impossibility of saying, how? But this man is a killer. He's suspected to be a killer. Or there are signs that how do you have him in a cabinet? The answer quietly in one's mind is, yeah, you have such a people in a cabinet at that moment so that you can secure the future. You remember one time on these commemoration days, a young woman asked me a very touching and maybe complicated question when she asked me publicly and said, President, it's like, why do you keep burdening the survivors with this weight of reconciliation so that the country moves on? In other words, she was telling me, actually, every burden about that is just loaded onto us, which I thought was true, which is true. So I wasn't really so much prepared for that question in that moment. It's like, why? You are always telling us, forgive, do what, and that. So it's like everything happened to us, but you still come to us and say, please allow us to move on. So I anyway quickly thought, it almost caught me unawares. But I quickly learned or remembered something that I had to tell the woman that, you know what, we burden you with all this responsibility and the weight of everything. because you are the ones who have something to give. Because what I meant was we need sort of reconcile the extremes. Is the extreme of the victims who suffered to the extreme, and then there's the side of the perpetrators, the extremity of what they actually did. I said, the only person I can turn to and go to and say, please, forgive, and ask for forgiveness or to give the other forgiveness, is the victim. I can't go to the perpetrator and say what? If you went to the perpetrator, what do you ask him to do? Just say, oh, don't kill again next time, you see. No, this is not an issue to beg from somebody. Just if you were thinking of doing it again, you need to be put in the right place. So, therefore, the burden ended up being on the side of the victims because they are the ones who had something to offer, to give to society, and that is something very difficult, to go beyond your pain and provide something that can help address the stability of our country for the future. For the perpetrators, there is little or nothing to be able to, you can't just go begging them to be better citizens next time. No, that's not. So, what was on our mind were all these things, the complexities of our society, of what happened, and how to get out of it. So one way was to have these people represented even in the cabinet. Yes, and say, okay. And then allow time, to deliver also on some of the means and the capacities to be able to address the many grievances we couldn't address because we do not have means or institutions to take care of that. So that's what happened.
Thank you very much. We would like to go to at least the other side of the room. Yes, please, at the top. Down there, a little bit. On.
They are in the room.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, I'm Ronald Mugabo, a student in Level 4 pursuing law. I'm currently the Guild President of University of Rwanda Way Campus and the Guild President of University of Rwanda. I'm very thankful to the President's Office, which gave me this opportunity of meeting my role model of today. So I have a question. For my sake, I'm going to be specific to my university, because there is a problem we have. There is a problem of agriculture. Agriculture is contributing out of the country's economy. But students from masters from University of Rwanda, College of Agriculture, Animal Sciences, and Veterinary Medicine, programs of crop science, agribusiness, agroforestry, soil management, and animal production. After being enrolled to master's programs, they are facing a problem of lack of tuition fees and living allowance from 2009. As before, and some other programs, they are being catered off and they are being given those scholarships and bursaries. So, Your Excellency, we request, if it would be possible, you can take part in that situation and you see if those students can be facilitated also. The other question we have, we're encountering, there is a problem of these new campuses you're having. There is Rusizi campus.
Thank you very much. Can we just have one question? You
Okay,
can
thanks
answer
a
that
lot.
one first. Thank you.
Anyway, the only thing I can promise and say about that is I have no problem working with those responsible to look into the matter and come out with the best thing we can do for the well-being of the students or even the faculty or the university. So on that one, I can promise you, I'm sure those responsible might be here listening. So we'll take it forward and see what we can do to address the problem.
Thank you very much. We're going to take one last question. Yes, lady at the back, please.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, President Paul Kagame, Dr. Swaniker. My name is Martina Abera Kawagambe. I'm currently a third-year student at the African Leadership University pursuing global challenges. In 1994, after the liberation struggle in Rwanda, a lot of people were scared, those inside the country and outside the country, and they were expecting a lot of chaos and havoc. But that was not the case. This country saw and experienced reconciliation and were given and provided hope for a better tomorrow. Now, currently, in this African continent, different countries are experiencing coups and chaotic changes or shifts in their leadership or governments. Now, my question goes to you, Your Excellency, President Paul Kagame. I would like to ask you, what is the ingredient for a smooth transition that leads to a positive transformation that is also inclusive? Thank you.
Well, you remember, I was going to say 94 to maybe 99. We were really struggling. There was a lot of chaos or confusion, especially 94, 5, 6. Things were not as good as they are today. So we had our own share of that situation of chaos and confusion. The world sometimes, and we keep seeing this everywhere, and we keep saying it, or people keep talking about learning lessons. This is something that is common everywhere in the world. They say, we learn from lessons, learning lessons. It is the UN, it's the country X, you learn lessons. Actually, the world and the countries don't learn lessons. They just end up, and you wonder why. Even in our situation, in Rwanda, the world said, Rwanda imploded and, genocide, chaos, and so on. And you had the UN here, and you had other people, even countries from outside. But still, bad things happened. Terrible things happened. They happened at the time they were here, from the beginning, the terrible things, or problems of managing the chaos continued, and the countries were here. And then every time there is that discussion, well, for sometimes academic debate purposes, wherever they say, lessons from here, lessons from Rwanda about this. But these lessons don't serve anyone, it seems, because people just end up. So we learned our lessons. There's no question about it. Maybe enough, maybe not enough, but what we learned was to pick our pieces from this tragedy we had in our history, try mold something out of it, a country that came back to be Rwanda and then move forward. And in doing that, and based on the lessons learned, was to be inclusive, to bring in everybody. This is why earlier we were talking about sometimes bringing even into cabinet people whose backgrounds were questionable. But doing it deliberately so that you give time for hearing or for finding the means to deal with the situations that you are not able to deal with at that moment. And also maybe give an opportunity to this person either to defend themselves or to be better people in the future. So it's about doing everything you can to try and bring these pieces together and for the better future. So now, about the rest of other parts of our continent. If people learned lessons, maybe some of those things could be avoided. I won't have to name names or anything. I'll be careful not to do that because I don't want to be the problem. The problem is already there, so I don't want to be to be used as an excuse now to be the problem. But you find what leads to some of the coups, maybe not all the coups, but the coups will come out of discontent, political discontent. And in fact, unfortunately, all these things about coups or sometimes where they have not happened, where you could actually say, this situation even it deserves a coup. You see, but it doesn't happen. But it happens amongst the elites, the ruling elites. The ordinary people who are the majority, the ones we serve, the ones even that elect us to serve in office and so on. Sometimes they really have no say because, or many times, there are situations where they have no say. Even when they go for elections, they elect Fred, and the winner is Kagame, is Paul, not Fred. So somehow, Paul, who has been in power, when it is Fred, he said, no. He uses the means of government to make sure that Fred does not go through. And so Kagame stays on the basis of the political power I have in my hands or the military control I have, and so on and so forth. So, in a way, the conflict is remains between Fred and Kagame. The ordinary people who were involved to elect their leaders will just go back home and go to their farms and wait for another call for elections after 4 or 5 years, or doesn't matter how many. So, when situations are like this, sometimes people get tired of Kagame manipulating, and there have been so many attempts, and maybe actually Fred might win several times, might stand for in different elections 3 times winning, but the results are in my favor because I can still twist them in my favor. Now, in between, and this is a question all of us can think about and have their say on. When you have these so-called elections that have gone on and the wrong person winning, suppose some parts of the country, let's say the army, which really should not even be, which should not be part of the politics, but which I used in my favor because I was the president and involved them in the politics. Suppose the part of it actually carried out a coup. We have found ourselves, now the problem here again is sometimes they may not carry out a coup in favor of the person who actually won elections. And say, you see, we followed, we knew you cheated, you didn't win, it's Fred who won, so we take over and give it to Fred. No. They take over and take it themselves. So you have three people among the elites who are disgruntled and who are fighting each other. It's me, it's Fred, and it's the army, the part of the army. As you see, this really does not involve adequately the people we lied to and said they are going to choose their leaders. But this takes me to another point. So in this case, if the coup happened, we have now gone to a point where we ask ourselves, is it a bad coup or is it a good coup? Originally, all coups are supposed to be bad, isn't it? Yes, coup d'etats have no place ordinarily in our society or in our politics. The army should stay out of politics and that's what we know, and that's the ideal situation we know. But then we have started having these realities where, in politics, then comes corruption, then comes nepotism, then comes all kinds of things. And I'm sorry to say, you see it in more than one places on our continent. You see where it is just, so you're ruling, then the family, the tribe, against others. This is not good politics. This can lead to anything. Now, especially corruption. So this is where now these people are going through to carry out coups. And in the end, you get confused when you say, in that place there was a coup. Then deep in your heart, you can say, well, I saw it coming, because you saw what maybe the leaders were doing. But otherwise, leaders supposed to have been elected leaders who should not be touched. But because of these realities on the ground and the things as they developed and maybe the mistakes they made, and the tribes and the corruption and all kinds of things, one or the other happens. And then the rest of the world is, And it's when we say, no, this coup should not be there, should not have been there, so everybody out and so on and so forth. Well, the reality is increasingly turning out to be different. Sometimes the people with the Fred now get an opportunity and say, no, but what are you talking about? Maybe these coup makers are okay, because after all, even the one who has been there, you are saying the coup has been carried against him, is not the one we elected. We elected Fred. So they will go out on the street celebrating, right? So it throws everything in turmoil, in chaos. Even people start saying, yeah, but what are the people saying? People are saying, yeah, they are happy with this. Even if you say the coup makers making a coup is bad, but there is an argument. People will say, no, but these are bad, but the ones they removed are worse. So which way do you go? You just go for the bad or for these ones who are worse? So this is what it's a problem that really needs to be looked at critically. Yes? Because if I'm going to entrench myself, no matter what people say, if I lose and Fred is the winner and I say, no, I am the winner, then you start losing the legitimacy. There's no question about it. And if a coup happened, then people will say, so be it. Of course, we are very polite when it comes to that, or diplomatic, I don't know what to call it. Nobody will really come out and say, this coup was justified. They always say, no, you see, what is the African Union saying? What is so-and-so saying? And nobody will say anything. So that's where we end. So, my friend, the question is as loaded as you can have it. It's very
Thank you so much for these questions. I'll now hand over the floor back to Dr. Swaniker for the firework.
Are there people who... I can give you a bonus, a few more questions.
Okay.
One or two.
We can now take it.
Thank you, Your Excellency. My name is Dianwa Mahoro. I'm a student at the University of Rwanda, Huye campus.
Just be short to the point, and then somebody else, and then we cover 3 instead of 1 in the same time.
Thank you. My question is, we have seen our country trying its best to deal with the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have also seen the government doing its part. Then my question is, then what do we need to do as youth? As young people, we have been hearing saying that we have to be doing big things and also taking care of the small things for the attention. Then what do we need to do, be it now, be it the Rwandans and the Africans at large? Thank you.
Right. So young people, first and foremost, take care of yourselves. That's number 1. As much as you can. Like you are putting on the mask and, keep your hands clean, don't go into congested areas. I know you have given up being in nightclubs or other places. So keep trying. Especially for us, we have to even take care of ourselves more than others, because while others are vaccinating, we have in most cases been left without vaccination. So the vaccine has its own protection it gives to people. So that one we have lacked largely. So we use all other methods science tells us to try and protect ourselves. So please start with that. The second is, ourselves really means each other. Don't don't protect yourself and think it ends there. No. Protect the one next to you as well. That's what putting on the mask means. In fact, it's not just protecting yourself, it's also protecting the other one next to you. So once the message is clear, the understanding of what we need to do in this problematic situation of a pandemic like this, is what you have to do to protect yourself, there's what you, at the same time, protect others, then contribute to, for example, when there are lockdowns, when there are this, when there's working from home, yes, quickly learn how to work from home and as productively as if you physically went to, or in person, to the office or to other place of work. So there are these limits that are set. We quickly understand them. We quickly understand why they are there, and then we conform to that, but trying to do our best to maximize on what we can have in the situation. So always being proactive and responsive, and when we happily get vaccine, to vaccinate people, you should be one to go in front of the line and be vaccinated if the vaccine is well, I'm not going to preach to anyone, but there are people who start having ideas, either conspiracy theories or some, I don't know, say if they put this thing in me and there's a friend of mine I got to know who was not going to be vaccinated. So when I met her, I said, why don't you take a vaccine? Then she told me her thinking, that she has been told by some scientifically aware people that vaccines are actually bad. They leave some bad things in our bodies which may affect us. I said, even a long time, even if maybe in 30 years and so on, you end up in a bad shape. So, but that person is almost my age. So I asked her, I said, but if you got the virus, what chance do you have? I said, if you got the virus now and you're not vaccinated, the chances are not plenty. I said, while if you got vaccinated, like me now, you're telling me I have 30 years to worry about the problem. I think I'll go for that one. I'll go for... I'll go for the worry of the next 30 years than just be knocked out in a week. So young people just need to be properly engaged and responsive and taking care of yourselves and contributing to the well-being of the nation and among other things.
We'll go to the other side of the room, please.
My name is James Abrahams. I'm a Kenyan from Kigal Independent University. My question is touching on the integration in East Africa, basically, and the promulgation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. As young people here today, we are gathered to get your knowledge on this. And in your experience as the former chair for the East African community, what are some of the areas in which we are not performing to the best of our ability that can help us integrate better and do trade with each other? Basically, yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. You start from home. Let's say, even here, before you cross the border to anywhere, just make sure that we, as a system, as a country, we are trying to do the best. We are productive, we are working with each other, we are building capacity to compete in the marketplace on anything. Start with that. Then second, yes, look for opportunity beyond your borders, because there is a lot more in actual fact. So the continental free trade area on our continent was created so that there can be this free movement of people, of goods, of services, and so on. So broadening not only the market, but of course for the sake of those who are serving or working in it. So that should be the thinking, and everything else will be coming straight to you. Hey, what are you doing internally here? What are we doing? What are we building? How competitive are we here? Even satisfy our market, and then work beyond that market, small market of Rwanda, to neighbors. And so I'm sure the same thing is happening with others, cross borders, from the other side of the border. People want to come and do business with you and invest with you. And so back and forth, competition, innovation, delivering on the market what you think you can produce competitively and sell it there. So that's really what we need to be doing. And as young people, you need to master this sort of thinking. And don't pity yourself, work hard, put every energy you have into it, and be able to move.
You can have the floor, please. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Mander. I am from Djibouti, and I'm a graduating student at the African Leadership University. At the African Leadership University, we are taught to dream big, to dream bold, and my question is Rwanda capable to welcome the World Cup? And if yes, when do you think it might be possible?
To welcome what? Sorry again.
Yes. Is Rwanda capable to welcome the World Cup?
Yes.
If yes, when do you think that might be possible? Thank you.
First of all, I agree with what African Leadership University is teaching. Thinking big and doing big. I entirely subscribe to that. That is, for me, the starting point. The second is about the World Cup, right? You see, I'm lucky because there is no threat that I might have it tomorrow. Because it is already booked for... The countries are known for, maybe the next 20 years. So I have myself to prepare for the next 20 years, right? So you never know.
Yes, please.
There is the advantage of being in the front here. So I saw that he started from the beginning, putting up his hand. And, Maybe you can prepare one there, so only one from there. You agree which one? Choose one from among yourselves, and then we will have you also.
Your Excellency, thank you, Your Excellency, for the bonus.
Short.
Yes, sir. My name is Tuesday Fabrice. I'm in School of Law at the University of Kigali. My concern goes to Dr. the CEO of ARU. Sir, you've said that if you want to get an opportunity, please join the loom. And then my concern is that sometimes you find that in that particular room there is a lot of person with a different position. So me was like, what are some criteria that one may follow as in to know the right person to go to? Thank you, yes, sir.
Hello?
Maybe I answered earlier even some of your questions. I don't know. They were coming to you and I assumed they were coming to me.
I thought you were the guest of honor, but I'll answer your question very quickly. My advice to you when you're in a room with people who have opportunities is to take the time to build relationships with them. I described that there are 4 steps to building a relationship, right? So when you meet someone for the first time, you have a connection with them. Maybe there's some chemistry, you have something in common, you exchange some ideas, they give you their card, you give their phone number. That's the first step. Then the second step, you get to continuous interaction. You exchange emails, you meet up for lunch, you take WhatsApp messages, you spend time together. And through that continuous interaction, the person gets to see whether you are someone who's a doer or just a talker. And they get to understand, are you a person with integrity or not? Are you someone who has the skills you're saying you have? And then they start to really form trust with you, which is the 3rd stage. And then only when you have trust, you get to 4th stage, which is collaboration. That's when you now can do something together. You get a job, you get venture capital for your business, you get funding for your nonprofit, whatever it is. So the mistake I see so many young people making is they meet someone today and then they expect something from them tomorrow. And you haven't done the work to show that you are someone, like the president was saying earlier, that you also are using the little that you have to get ahead, to do the best you can, and that you're someone that can be trusted, and then that they can invest in you. So that's my advice for you, is take time to build relationships just for relationships' sake. Don't just be going and getting things from people. The final thing I'll say is, you need to think about relationship building like a bank account. You can't just withdraw from it and take. You also need to give, especially if you're a leader. Your role as a leader is not just to get stuff, it's to give and to create opportunities for others. So just as you are in the room and you're getting opportunities, you must be creating opportunities for other people. And if you do that, then you'll find that you'll succeed.
Thank you very much. So our last question.
Quickly here, we finish and take one from there if they have sorted themselves out, and then we see.
Thank you, Your Excellency. My name is Benin Isawane, representing Davis College and Aquila. Well, Mr. President, as someone who has always been the key person behind the Rwandan development, I would like to hear from you, what is the one key thing that guides you and makes you capable of doing all the things you do in such a unique way as you do? Thank you, sir.
Well, I'm not sure, but I thought you were going to tell us about yourself, but for lack of better ways of putting it, I find, first of all, there is something maybe I'm not really very responsible for. Nature, shapes you the way it wants sometimes. Maybe your genes or something So there are things. Then there is also the nurture, the environment. So for every human being, by the way, I'm not talking about myself. So the environment shapes you, combines with the nature, with the person, then, so in the environment you learn things, you are attracted to some, you reject others, you want to do things, you develop interest in, so because of what you've been exposed to and so on. So DRF, for me, what I've done or contributed to for this country and with others comes from sort of that background. So the environment I grew up in, and then probably part of me that I'm not very, I can't say I determined on that. It's like I did not determine what my height is or what my big size is. So I can't, sometimes these are things that happen to you and you are not responsible here, you cannot. But then once you are there with that, and then, so for me, thrust into the world of Rwanda and then politics and the history of Rwanda, so I have benefited one way or the other from this compression of nature and nurture. So that's how I happen to be doing things the way I do. And then quickly, and then we go up, and maybe we need to wind down.
I have one from here then.
Thank you, His Excellency. Junius Bonu from Carnegie Mellon University, Africa. I wanted you to tell us, we've seen what have been done by you and your team regarding digital transformation of Rwanda. A lot of countries are still trying, and I want you to tell us the key ingredient of such a successful digital transformation, and if you were to give an advice to an aspiring African future tech leader, what would it be?
I wish you had asked the person next to you. She's responsible for things digital. But I think it's like many other things. One, it is about people. You have young people who. And then, as I said earlier, most things are driven by our political thinking as well. But you have the people, you have the thinking, and then the rest is to be organized and to put the tools in place, which are in the end a part of the investments you make in people, infrastructure. And then when these things have happened, they start producing what encourages other people to, well, it is, if you see how digital technology drives businesses, drives services, or as we said, even during the pandemic, you see, I think to a decent extent, we did fine because the thinking, the infrastructure, the people, the tools were already in place. So once people said, oh, no going back to place of work, nothing, you need to work from home. It's like people woke up and say, oh, actually it is possible because we already have this. We're only going to do it in the office, but you could do it from here using these tools we have. And so it's the investments never go wrong once you have invested in the people, in the policy, in infrastructure. and then the politics of it will drive it, but more so it will be accelerated by what you see is already the outcome, what starts happening that you find is beneficial. Advice?
Advice for an aspiring technology leader. He wants to be a technology leader in Africa, and he's asking, what advice would you give for someone like him?
Oh, it is, you grasp those ideas and find your place in the middle of that. Okay.
You have time
but for any more advice, please, you knew her? All along she was sitting next to you and you didn't. She's the Minister of IT and plus. And
should we have the last question?
Hello?
Up there, we agreed up there.
Morning. My name is Daniela Ngarambe. I'm a master's student in electrical and computer engineering at CMU Africa. And my question is, despite being the lowest emitting continent in the world, Africa...
What? Despite?
Despite being the lowest emitting continent in the world.
Okay, right.
Africa is facing a lot of repercussions in terms of climate change. And my question was, how can the youth contribute to slowing down climate change in Africa and improve intercontinental relationships to fast-track this agenda? Thank you.
I need to write a book for the answer. It would be a long answer, but I think I understand what you are saying. The Africa being more at the receiving end, really, of the climate crisis, and yet not contributing as much as... So what we need to do is to start early ourselves, not to solve the problem. So we have to leapfrog, not to start solving the problem by going the route of those others who are emitting and trying to reverse, and then trying to reverse that ourselves in the long run. So we have to leapfrog. It is adoption of these technologies that are green in their nature, and also trying to think hard about the very policies that can... Because like now we are developing in many ways. We are starting from a low base. If we start adoption of these technologies, for example, and developing that way, we have a chance, first of all, of managing our situation the way it should be ourselves, but also use that as a basis for the others now who even are polluting the world more than ourselves, and making certain demands so that maybe in the future people start paying for their level of polluting our environment. So you will be on the good side of that from the... But this requires a concerted effort. It requires all of us to understand, and it doesn't matter which field you are in. It's about the thinking so that you contribute to the future well-being. So somebody else there, and then I told you to choose one, but I can still see 5. Sorry, moderator, I took over your...
Yes, you can have...
So you and the one behind you. One... in the
Thank you, Mr.
light blue
President.
shirt or something.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Muhammad Umar. I'm from Sudan. I study AI at Carnegie Mellon. My question is, you have made a strong point on addressing the African context and grassroots solutions. But I also recognize that this is a very common political talking point for many African leaders. I would like you to tell us, from your long experience,
Fred, say they're addressing what?
The African context.
The African context.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, right,
but
right.
yeah, as I mentioned, it's a common political point for many African leaders. And from your long experience, and because I truly believe that you are the only person I can trust to actually answer me transparently about that, what do you think is the African context? Because, of course, it's not just development. The Global South has very similar social illnesses and economic illnesses to Africa. What makes Africa unique? Is it just a political talking point to pass on things like native and local policies without being bothered? And how can we use this knowledge of really addressing and knowing what exactly you mean by the African context in developing and creating truly African, truly strong, truly effective institutions, technological frameworks, and solutions to build the Africa of tomorrow? Thank you.
You see, the African context, if you will, really means the African story, because Africa was not born yesterday. Africa has been there for a long time. And then we have seen how things have evolved over many years. So in that African story and the context, if you will, there is the African itself context and how it interacts with external factors or actors. So these have come together. So what I mean, therefore, when I'm talking about the African context myself, or the way I understand it, is these two things as mashed together. And so from the perspective of the African, what do you want? You may not say, no, I'm going to be the African of 18th century or 17th. That's the original, the real African. That evolution and the interaction between the African story and the externalities that affected it have formed a completely different context or evolution where we find ourselves. And in that, there are things we have to accept and others we have to reject. One simple thing, the mentality of it. If there is any notion that the African story has to be shaped from outside, it's what the outside tells us to do that you do, I will say, no, that's not correct. I will say, at least the minimum, we should talk about it. You see, you give me a chance to interact with you on what you think is good for me. That is the minimum. And that is different from saying, no, don't talk to me, don't say anything to me. Leave me alone to my African context as I explain it, as I think it is. Because in the end, we don't think about that the same way, even as Africans. So there has got always to be that back and forth. It's like, no, give me a moment. If you are from outside and you say, no, you should be doing this, you do this. I say, no, but this is Africa. You are from somewhere else. And I know, I'm conscious that the African story is this meeting point of the Africa itself, as it has always been, and has been evolving, but also with the interaction with the rest of the world, because there is not going to be that without that interaction. So now, that is for me the African context I'm talking about, and we should be able to explain it. You see, I think that point is very good, but very broad in a sense. You see, it's like in a country. You find a country in Africa, X, or let's even call it Rwanda. The politics might be wrong or go wrong. It's not serving really the interests of the people of Rwanda. Or the leaders may be the wrong leaders who even do harm to their own people, the people they are supposed to lead, including sometimes killing people, your own people. There is no such a situation that is going to justify that you are going to do these wrong things. And the people should keep quiet because this is your country, this is your Africa, this is your country. No. The African or the continent or the country or the African country also has certain standards, has certain values, has certain minimum. You see, it's like even in our own country in '94, when the genocide was happening, actually there were all kinds of arguments across the world, including at the UN. By the way, that when it happened at the UN, Rwanda was holding a non-permanent seat at the UN Security Council. So, and the ambassador who was there at the time really was arguing. It was like telling people off. It's like what we are doing in Rwanda is our business. You see what I mean? So it's like, no, this is the African, this is the Rwandan story, leave us alone. No, there is no, when it crosses a certain line, it is no longer just Rwandan. It has become internationalized. It's to be looked at in the very wide context of the world standards and what is expected of you. So we have to be careful so that indeed people don't abuse the African context. The African context, if properly defined and described, has nothing wrong with it. If you take care of all of these needs and parameters that have to be driving our politics and our development and that context. So to the African Union, therefore, African Union is a structure that is in place that brings together Africa, through which we can bring these ideas or grievances or, any misunderstandings or different ideas we don't agree on, and try and narrow the gaps that are there and see if we can make a... So that's why people sometimes are in or out and saying this or saying that, or when it happens to a problem and say, oh, African Union needs to intervene, some people, the Africans themselves may be uncomfortable and say, oh, I don't, because then you realize there is something wrong, because why would you be afraid of the African institution getting involved? It's that trying to run away from, being able to come up front and explain what you are doing and say there's nothing wrong. So in other words, you are just fearing accountability or being held accountable, and that's why you are avoiding it. Otherwise, and if anything, if the institution of the African Union was going to do something and there's something wrong, there are also ways of checking it and say, no. These structures that is supposed to be serving all of us is not actually serving all of us, has gone astray. Then there is somebody to come up and say, no. We can check that excess if there is. But there can be excess with the country or with the institution. So, but voices should come up and say what they want to say about correcting something. But the African context is there and exists and should be actually strengthened. But bearing in mind of, this interaction with, on the final point on that, you see, I really find it problematic in that interaction that somebody believes they have the right and the power and everything to say something about you and even be consequential about that, and when you cannot say anything about them. You see, that is, I would not mind if you would come to me and say, this is wrong, please, you must change. I say, okay, then I look at it. But you should accept that at one time, if you are doing anything wrong, I should be able to point out and say, hey, please, what is going on? Yes. Otherwise, we would have such a bad imbalance where, it's like everyone right here, east, west, north, east, south, north, south. I always hear people talking about God, right? And when they are talking about God, it's like God is good for all of us, right? I don't think God would have made one part of the world more important than the other part. Yeah, somebody behind you, and maybe we end there.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm Khalil, a Tunisian student in Carnegie Mellon, Africa, focusing on IT entrepreneurship. So I totally get, I'm totally amazed by how Rwanda is now trying to be a business hub. So one of the questions that I want to ask is how today Rwanda is trying to support to build startups here and also to expand them. And meanwhile, also how to support African startups to also come to Rwanda. And by support, it includes programs, tax reduction, financial support, and everything. Thank you.
Yeah, but you have said it all. You have actually answered the question. That's exactly what you want to do.
The timeline.
Sorry?
The timeline.
Timeline.
Because I saw Startup Act, which have been already a working project, but I guess it got postponed thanks to COVID.
Yeah, timeline, it shouldn't go beyond the next 3 years, actually. Okay. But if we can do it in 1 year or less, that's what we will do. Perfect. Right? So it is a journey we are walking, knowing that many things we don't have in place, but we are trying to put in place as quickly as we can. But I should say, I would be more comfortable from now going forward. We should see a lot of progress, and there should be no questions in the next or beyond 2-3 years.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all those questions from the floor, and thank you, Mr. President, for your generosity in giving us this extra time and for giving the bonus questions to our audience. We're about to wrap up now. To wrap up, Mr. President, we'll just take 5 minutes. We're going to do something that I call, it's my favorite thing to do on this pathway, called the fire walk.
Okay.
So for this part of the conversation, Mr. President, I'm going to ask you a series of questions in a rapid fire session.
Rapid fire is something I experienced more than...
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
Well, this one is more friendly, rapid fire.
Yeah, like 30 years ago.
And so I'm going to ask you to respond to these questions in 7 words or less. 7 words or less. Sometimes it will be even less than that. I'll let you know. But maximum 7 words. So the first question is, name one thing many people don't know about you. Just one thing.
Everything is known about me.
Oh. Describe your presidency in 3 words.
Opportunity to serve.
Wow, brilliant. Opportunity to serve, that is perfect. I wish more African presidents would see their jobs that way. Finish this sentence, again in less than 7 words. Rwanda is.
You are home.
You're home. All right, thank you. What is one thing you have learned from being a grandfather?
Age.
Age. Okay. Name one item you could never live without.
Information.
Information. Wow. What did you want to be when you were a little boy?
A pilot. I want to fly planes.
A pilot. Okay. Where do you go to think?
Anywhere.
Anywhere. Always thinking. Arsenal or Paris Saint-Germain?
Both.
Education or leadership?
Two sides of the same coin.
Ah, okay. What makes you smile?
Family.
Family. Beautiful. Best basketball player of all time?
Steph Curry.
Stephen Curry. All right. What 3 words would First Lady Mrs. Kagame use to describe you?
You better ask her.
Okay. All right. So the final question, Your Excellency, of this whole interview, this whole conversation, and this time you don't have to limit yourself to just 7 words. What are your parting words to our audience, to everyone who's in the room, to the young people in the room, to the room members listening online and Zoom, and to everyone watching on YouTube? What are your final parting words for everyone that has joined us today?
Young people, you have opportunity. Just take it and run with it.
Great. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a truly remarkable conversation with one of the greatest leaders of our time. To the young leaders in the audience, I hope you're leaving with some powerful nuggets of wisdom that you will use on your own journeys of impact. To everyone who's joined us in this conversation, I hope you have seen a remarkable example of someone who is doing hard things. And one of the things, Mr. President, that really struck me was your point about how to do the hard things, sometimes you have to just focus on the simple things and the details. Right? You can dream big, think about have grand ambitions, but also be detail-oriented at the same time. And I think that for me is what I'm leaving here today, is just really the importance of not forgetting the small things, getting started, and that's how we all are going to begin to transform this continent. Thank you, Mr. President. It's been such a pleasure having you.
Appreciated, much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you.